Hi, everyone. I'm Russ Lowenthal with the Database Security Product Management Team, and I am joined today by Alan Williams. Alan is the Senior Principal Product Manager in charge of so much inside the database, but basically anything having to do with authentication. That would include Kerberos, certificate radius, user centralization like centrally managed users or enterprise user security, and access controls like database vault, real application security, virtual private database, and label security. This month's topic is a new feature that Alan and his team developed for Database 21C that they have backported to 19C, and the new feature is called Gradual Password Rollover. Just a reminder, we do record these calls. I'll usually have the call up on the Ask Tom website within a day or two after the session ends. And we do these calls office hours every month, the second Wednesday of each month. We do two sessions, one at 9 o'clock U.S. Central, the other at 6 p.m. U.S. Central, and it's the same content. The idea is just to give you the choice to pick one that is convenient for your schedule. As we go along, if you have questions, please enter them into the Q&A channel. Alan and I do monitor Q&A. We'll try and answer those questions as we go along, and any we don't get to during the presentation, we'll get to at the end of the session. You are not limited to just today's topic. Any question on database security is fair game. If we don't know the answer, we'll find out and get back to you. Before we dig into today's topic, just a couple of announcements. The first one is we did release the July 2021 quarterly patch update. That brings, if you're on 19C, the version up to 1912. And again, this is how we get to Gradual Database Password Rollover, which after you see Alan's presentation, you're going to want to use this. But even outside of that, there are some security fixes in this month's or this quarter's release update, 16 of them. The highest of those was an issue with native network encryption that I'll be talking about in just a few minutes before I turn it over to Alan, and that was an 8.3. If you'd like more information on the quarterly patches, take a look at MOS Note 211.8136.2, and you can see that here on the screen. We also completed ISO 15448 certification, more commonly known as Common Criteria. Common Criteria is an internationally recognized standard, as is ISO, and we submit all of our long-term releases for Common Criteria evaluation. It takes a little over a year to go through the certification, so even though 19C has been out for a while, we did just complete that certification earlier this summer. One interesting thing about this version's certification is when we submitted the 19C, we also submitted database vault, label security, and multi-tenant. So if you're using any of those, Oracle database, database vault, label security, or multi-tenant, and you have questions about certification and independent evaluation of the software for security, we do have the certificate up on our website that describes more about it. And I went ahead and created a short URL called bit.ly/oracle_common_criteria that you can go to for more details. We've also released Key Vault version 21.2. This is the first update to Key Vault 21, which we initially released January of this year. And our big things that are new in 21.2 is expanded support for managing certificates. That includes the ability to see when a certificate is going to expire, to report and generate alerts on certificates that are coming up for expiration. We expanded our software development kits so that we can retrieve details about the certificate. We did similar work with SSH keys, so you'll see that both public and private keys are no longer just objects. You can now actually tell what they are. This allows for better operations with them. And we did some enhancements to our Key Vault command line interface, allowing you to locate objects in Key Vault, not just based on the object name, but upon most of the attributes that describe it, including custom attributes. As people are starting to use Key Vault more and more for secrets management, as well as just key management, keys, you're only going to have a certain number of keys, but with secrets, that number gets very, very large quickly. So the ability to do searches where you return just the objects you need is much more important. If you'd like more details on what we've done in Key Vault 21.2, just look at the Key Vault admin guide, and you'll see changes in this release, and it goes into more detail. For those of you that haven't upgraded to Key Vault 21 yet, just a note that Key Vault 18.8 should be out fairly soon, and this is the terminal release update, the last release update for Key Vault 18. So if you haven't already begun your upgrade planning, it is time to start on that. Okay. Another new product release is Database Security Assessment Tool, and we've made a minor update. It was 2.2.1. We've just released 2.2.2. What's new in 2.2.2 is that Database Security Assessment Tool now understands what type of database it's looking at. So if it's looking at an autonomous database, it'll give you recommendations that are appropriate for autonomous. If it's looking for a cloud service database, it'll give you recommendations for that. If it's looking at Enterprise Edition instead of Standard Edition, it'll give you recommendations that make sense within the context of the database you're working with. So this is a nice change because it allows you to, not to have to remember, well, this doesn't really apply because I'm on autonomous. We now just show you things that make sense to you. We've added in some new findings. One of those is for gradual password rollover, which we'll be talking about a little bit later on. We've also added some checks to examine whether or not you've got FIPS 140 set to true. We've updated some of our severity. We got some feedbacks that what we had judged as critical in a couple of cases probably shouldn't have been, and a few things that we had judged as low severity, kind of the community agreed that they should be a higher severity. So you'll see all of those updates in 2.2.2, and that's available for you now from My Oracle support. Just search for DBSAT, and you can download the utility from My Oracle support. Last announcement before we turn it over to Alan is one of the things that we did in the July release update, and this is true for 19C, which is kind of what I talked about earlier, but it's also true for 12.1, 12.2, any of the supported database versions, is a fix for a vulnerability that a security researcher found in native network encryption. I've got the CVE here on screen. While we were doing that fix, we also took the opportunity to add in 2 new SQLnet.aura parameters. One of those you would use on the client side, and the client side parameter is allow weak crypto, and the server side would be allow weak crypto clients. Now, we didn't want to break a bunch of stuff as soon as you applied the release update, so right now, both of these parameters default to true. If you don't explicitly have them outlined in your SQLnet.aura, then they're going to be true. If you set the client side allow weak crypto to false, then what this does is it changes the behavior of the client so that it can no longer negotiate. If someone requests a weaker algorithm, it can no longer negotiate down to any of those algorithms that are considered to be unsecure. With the server side parameter, allow weak crypto clients, if you set that to false, then we are not going to allow an unpatched client. So the first one is just eliminating weak ciphers. The second one is once you're sure you've got all of your clients patched, you turn this to false. And now if someone tries to connect with an insecure client that still has the CVE 2021-2351 vulnerability, then that connection will be rejected. Okay. If you'd like more details on this, I've got the Moss note that describes it at the bottom of the screen. That's 279.1571.1. Okay. And that is it for announcements. I'm going to turn it over to you, Alan.
Fantastic. And you stole my thunder, Russ. You said it was already backported. That's always a fun one to talk about. But thanks for the introduction, Russ. This is a gradual password rollover is a feature that's been requested by many users, and it's released in 21C. As Russ mentioned, it is backported to 19C. This feature allows you to eliminate application downtime when changing application passwords on a database. So I'm Alan Williams. As Russ mentioned, I'm product management with database security. I've been with the team for about 7 years, and previous to that, about 9 years in Oracle at the National Security Group, working on national security projects as a consultant. So almost 16 years at Oracle. So, why do we do this, or why are they interested in something like this? Well, a big part of this is to remain compliant with security requirements. Many customers are required to rotate their passwords, including passwords on the database. So for DBAs, that's pretty easy. They can change their passwords by themselves using their tools. Utilities, the ones that are used periodically, ad hoc, their passwords can be changed whenever they're not being used. But then applications, that's the tricky one, right? They run 24/7. They find it difficult to schedule downtime and reset passwords and remain compliant with the security requirements. And scheduling downtime for applications, as you all know, can be very time and labor intensive. These changes frequently have to go through change request processes requiring approvals prior to any changes even taking place. Then you got the actual downtime execution. You got the notifications, the shutting down the applications, potentially they're changing the passwords on the database as well as the application side. Hopefully using wallets and not in clear text files, and then restarting the application if they had to shut it down, and ending the downtime with additional notifications. And one of my prior data center jobs, they took 3 hours to start up applications. So that really also cut into the downtime amount of time it took. But, customer applications frequently they have to stay up 24/7 these days, and downtimes impact internal or external SLAs they need to maintain. And SLAs usually have payment or other penalties for violating the availability agreement. One customer talked to me and said their application passwords never get changed because of this impact. Others will do it infrequently and only during application upgrades, which require their own downtime. So with customers delaying password changes, piggybacking on other downtime opportunities, they'll frequently be out of compliance and may need waivers with their security teams. So the new database 21C feature called Gradual Password Rollover, and you'll see references sometimes to this called Gradual Database Password Rollover, but the acronym for that, GDPR, sounds more like a European security acronym, so I tend to just use GPR. But it is just a database password. It allows a customer to create a new password in the database for the application and still allow the old password to work. During the rollover period, both passwords are allowed. This allows the application time to change their password. When all the passwords have been changed, the old password will expire and only the new password will be allowed. So the way GPR is enabled by adding a new limit called password rollover time to the profile for the service accounts. So the default value is 0. So if you don't put this in there, anything in there, it'll just have the default value of 0. But entering a non-zero value will enable the password changes to go through a rollover period. The value is in days, and parts of a day are allowed, but it needs to be expressed in fractions. For example, 12/24 for 12 hours, or like the minimum value is 1 hour, represented by the fraction 1/24. The maximum 60 days. That could vary if you also set password lifetime or password grace time. Maximum time it will be a lower of 60 days, password lifetime, or password grace time. I see a lot of cases where password grace time is set to 5 days. So in that case, the maximum time for password rollover time will be 5 days. See an update to the password lifecycle graphic that's in the database security guide. We've had 4 phases now. We've broken up phase 1 into showing a password rollover time. And during that time, you'll see a new account status where it shows open and in rollover. So in most cases, your users will be either open or open and in rollover. That's the new status. I'll talk more about the different, some additional new status names that we've introduced with rollover. So once, once this is set in the profile, Gotta make sure your user is associated with a profile, and you could use that with create user or alter user to make sure it's associated. Then to start password rollover, you just need to create a new password. And this will start the rollover time period specified in the profile. And that could be through SQL, through the password, SQL Plus, or through OCIC API. And you have that amount of time to change the password on the application side. And during this time period, the application can log into the service account using either the old or the new password. Once the password updates have been completed, you can either let the old password expire at the end of the rollover time or force it to expire by another alter user command. Now there's some corner cases that we allow for. So if you want to change the password again, whether it's because the password was entered incorrectly the first time for the new password, you can run a number of different alter user commands to change the password. But one thing to remember, you can change it 50 times in 5 days, but the expiration, the password change time is fixed. It doesn't change. Once the rollover time starts, it'll expire at the original time. You can't keep extending it by changing the password. This only applies to database users. It doesn't apply to any of the external authenticated users. This kind of makes sense, right? This because those are the passwords are maintained in external systems, Kerberos, PKI Radius, or OID, or Active Directory with the centrally managed users. Users using HTTP digest authentication, this won't work for them. And this will not work for 10G password verifiers. It's only work for 11G and 12C password verifiers. And for role passwords, which activate roles when used, it doesn't work for that. And for users with administrative privileges, like the sysopper, sysbackup, and such, will not work for them because that has to be synchronized with a password file. And so you will not be able to grant administrative privileges to users that are members of a profile that has gradual password rollover. So the user, so this is an important thing to keep a note. At the end of the rollover time, there is no special daemon or process that runs to clean up the user verifiers and such, because obviously the database has to store the extra verifier during this time to be able to authenticate the service account with either one. So what happens is it stays in rollover until the first login after the expiration. And when a user first logs in after the GDPR expiration, obviously with the new password, the old verifier will be removed, and then the user status will be updated. Some additional notes. As I said, both the old and new passwords can be used during the rollover period. Now, only the database server needs to be upgraded. Existing supported database clients will be able to leverage this without getting patched or upgraded. So this is a huge win, right? The clients can remain, working with 11G and 12C verifiers. Does not have to be upgraded. Doesn't even know this is going on. And this, as Russ mentioned, it's been backported 19C, and it's just the one we just released in July, the last RU, 19.12. This is for cloud and on-premises databases. And for user accounts that have they're not set for password rollover, there is no performance change. You're still going to go through the normal login process when they authenticate with the password. And for accounts that are in rollover, periodically those will have to go through check both passwords, and that also will have a small performance impact, a second round trip for that, but that's about it. And then you'll have new information in DBA users column for the account status with the rollover information. I'll talk more about that. Now, it's important also to understand when, what particular verifiers are used, because you want to make sure, at the end of the rollover time that there's no one else using the old passwords. So unified audit logon events will capture which password was used. And this will be in the authentication type column under unified audit. It'll tell you the version of the verifier, whether it's 12C or 11G. It'll tell you whether it's the old or the new verifier. And it'll also tell you some capability flags about the client that's that logged in, whether what it supports. That usually tell you the version of the clients. So here's a sample of a unified audit with this information. The authentication type has this logon info equals verifier equals 12C-new. So obviously tells you it's 12C and new in that one. Another example here shows you the verifier equals 11G old, still using the old verifier. If you want to simplify your query, so going through all this, you can select information from the Unified Audit Trail and do a regex to look for verifier with -old, and that'll get you a list of the clients that are still logging in using the old verifier. So I mentioned that account status has some new statuses. Previously, we've had 9. We have 6 new ones, all to do with rollover. And instead of spending time on this particular call about each and all these new statuses, this is actually really well explained in the documentation for DBA users and tells you what all these will be about. Now, most often they'll be between open and in rollover. So there's good documentation. I'm a big doc fan. I make sure documentation stays updated. I make frequent changes or request changes to documentation on a rolling basis, not just during database upgrades. And this was initially released in 21C, but the documentation, we're now starting to update documents when we backport these features. So this documentation is also available in 19C in the Database Security Guide. So at this time, I'll be open for any questions.
Next office hours, September 8th. That's Wednesday, September 8th. Again, we'll do 2 sessions. And it's a toss-up what the topic is going to be. It may be Database 21C new features. And I know 21C has been out for a bit, but until the on-premises release is available, a lot of people don't look at it. And we're getting close to the time when that's going to become available. So it may either be Database 21C new features, or if the release timeframes just happen to align perfectly, there is a major change coming to both security and user assessment in DataSafe, which is going to be pretty cool. So if that happens first, then we'll do the DataSafe topic. Otherwise, we'll do Database 21C new features.